Welcome one, welcome all, and what can you say about this Sunday? Maybe the best two words in sports, Game 7. That will be a show later on with Big T and JSU at 3 p.m. You also have the baseball show just an hour later, and then obviously you have the NASCAR show starting now at Pocono. It should be a great time ahead, and it will be a fun Sunday. Stats, how are you doing with me this morning?
I'm a little hungover, but I'm well. I'm well, man. So, yeah. Hey, look, we're coming off a pretty good week. Last week had the winner with SVG, your boy. So that was it seemed too easy.
So it's going to be a really funny thing because I locked Bell and SVG, right? And I played, MMA and stuff. I locked them both. I lost money on the slate. I mean, like, that was one of the most shocking things. And I know that with the Sims, it tries to get different a lot. But I'm sitting there at the end of the slate. I'm like, how did I lose money? Having the two best plays by far. How did I not match the four next best plays in any combo at all? Like, I was in the $5, the lug nut or whatever they call it, the chrome horn, the 15 and everything. I'm like, how did none of those have even close to the nuts?
I feel like I saw you in maybe it was a single entry. Was it one of the single entries where you were up in the top 10? I could have swore I saw your name up in one of them.
Yeah, the main team did well. So like
right.
I lost money still, but the main team, I know that I was really banking on because they didn't end up going Ryan Truex, and Ryan Truex ended up being in a winner in a lot of those single entry teams and stuff, which was shocking because it was the best thing too. Ryan Truex got beat the hell up, wrecked like 3 different times, and somehow is still in the winner and gets like 24th or whatever. So, but yeah, it was a pretty fun slate. Like, it was just one of those things where I just kept looking up and like, man, how do I not have any sort of combo with Bell and SVG that can make some money? I know in the 15, it was 15 last week. I was just drawing dead the entire time. I had zero hope. So let's hope that this changes this week. Should be a fun time. And we're going to do this screen share. I know. Good morning, Andy. Morning, It'll Do fam. Morning, Jake. Should be a fun race that we have. And we're going to start with the studs as always here, Stats. But first, what's the track breakdown for you with Pocono? I know that this is, the triangle. So, it's going to be a little bit different shape than what we've had, in the past and stuff. But obviously, Pocono has been on the calendar a long time. What's the breakdown?
Yeah, so this is it's a unique track. I mean, it's 2.5 miles, and the only 2.5 mile tracks outside of road courses are the super speedways. This race is nothing like a super speedway. Really, what we want to look at for a comp is probably Michigan, which they raced earlier this year. That's a 2-mile track, and it comps out fairly well to correlates fairly well, I should say, to Pocono. So if you want to, outside obviously of looking back at the Pocono history, Michigan would be a good place to look as a comparable. But because it's 2.5 miles, we don't have all that many Dom points, 160 laps. This is a track that is very difficult to pass. So we're looking for, when we're looking in practice, really want to look at that short-term speed, because you've got to get your position on the restarts. And then once you're at, especially if you're out in clean air, which the leader will be, that is essential here. So once that leader, whoever starts this race, and Denny's on the pole, and obviously he's had a lot of success here, whoever gets that lead early and on these restarts, it's going to be really tough to pass them. So some of these guys that are starting way in the back, and we've got some good ones in the back, they'll have the ability to move up, but to a degree, right? Once they start getting into some of those better cars, it's going to be really tough to pass. So interesting race. Don't expect a ton of carnage and wreckage in this race. I think it'll be interesting. And also, if you're looking at practice times, the split between the A practice time and the B practice time were significantly different. The A time was the A groups much worse than the B. So if you're looking at practice times and seeing some of the top drivers who did not fare all that well in practice compared to some of the others, more than likely they were in the A group and not the B. So you kind of have to compare apples to apples when looking at practice time. So again, if you're looking at practice, pay attention to the 3 and 5 lap speed, average speeds, more so than the long lap speed, because of what I said, where it's going to be really difficult once these guys kind of get in their position, really difficult to pass here.
Yeah, and it was one of those things too. Even the Xfinity race yesterday, obviously we had Zillish that ended up being the winner of that race, but Dale was his crew chief for that one, and he was just saying, "Get in the clean air. We have the car that will win as long as it's in clean air." Well, we know how those Xfinity cars, they're a little bit better in dirty air than these Cup cars. There's a very good chance that one of Denny or Buescher could just jump out to a lead early, and all of a sudden they're just checked out. Where there might not be a ton of dominator points here, but at the same time, it could kind of stick with just a few drivers where it's more than worthwhile. So one of those drivers could drop 70, 80 points. But the big thing to note here is that the amount of place differential plays that we have is insane. I know qualifying was a bit of a mess. A meal was made of it. And you have guys like, William Byron starting there 31st, Kyle Larson 24th, even their Hendrick teammate, Alex Bowman starting 25th, Bubba Wallace 34th. You just have a bunch of guys, Josh Berry also 35th, bunch of PD plays. And it's going to be interesting stats because how do you balance the DOMs versus the place differential plays? And one of the questions that was already thrown into the Discord was, how many DOMs today? And to me, I think the answer is one. And then probably you don't want two. I was like 1.5, right? Like if I have one in my lineup, I'm happy. If I have two, I'm like, okay, I mean, it's fine in tournaments, but I know single entry, I don't see myself going 2 DOMs at all, though. Like in my main lineup, I don't think I'm going to go 2. What's your take on the DOM versus PD today?
Yeah, so I mean, in the 3 next-gen races that we've had here, you've basically had 4 place differential plays, I think, in every single one of them. And the DOM play, they're not always necessarily like heavy DOM point plays. They were just drivers who started near the front and then finished up at the front. So you're going to need at least 4 drivers here starting, anywhere from 15th back. You're always going to have about at least 4 of those. What we've seen historically, like I said, is 1 or 2 drivers who are starting up near the front and then finish near the front. I think in 24 was the let's say the lowest starter. Bowman was started 6th, finished 3rd, was in the winner, and Blaney started 8th and won the race, was in the winner. Other than that, we've had either the pole sitter or someone on that front row, if not both. If you go back to 22, Busch and Hamlin were on the front row, both finished. They wound up finishing exactly how they started, 1-2, and they finished in the winner. So yeah, so you're going to need at least 4, and we've got so many options here, as you kind of went through, of place differential guys that I actually think we got a couple of guys, at least one, even in my 150, that I'm going to probably lock button here, just because you're going to need the place differential. When you look back, it's been very rare that we've had quality drivers starting 30th or further back, and almost all of those drivers who have hit the winner have been kind of mid-range drivers who have started in 30th or worse, and they have about a 50% success rate to hit the winner. So the guys like Byron, who have one of the better cars and pretty good on tracks like this, I think is almost outside of wrecking, is almost a lock here, I think, to be in the winner.
Yeah, like you said, Michigan's a good track comp. So if people were wondering, like, hey, what track can I find out? You mentioned earlier in the show that Michigan could be one that you could look at and just see how these drivers have performed. But you're right. How do you get 2 different off the PD plays that we have? And it will be an interesting thing to kind of dive in. But we'll start at the top here. Denny Hamlin starting on pole with the best odds to win the race. What is that? Plus 300 to win the race there on DraftKings Sportsbook. I know when you look at Denny, right? Obviously got to skip last week. Whatever. Is his kid born yet? I mean, I hope so. I know that 2 weeks ago we were talking about him missing the race, then misses or 3 weeks ago even.
Mm-hmm.
And then last week ends up missing the race, and then obviously back into the car now. You also got Ryan Blaney, which again, this is where that PD mix comes in with Blaney, Larson, and Byron all starting 20th or worse. You have Bell and Reddick, who kind of rival Hamlin up here. I think this is kind of going into the pricing, the way it was kind of set up. Can you go Reddick or Bell with Hamlin, right? Like that's one of the things that you can debate. I know that you said Blaney started 8th and hit the winner. Alex Bowman started 6th and hit a winner in recent times. So maybe you can do a max of 2 of those guys starting inside the top 10 because I don't think you're going to be able to fit all 3. But yeah, I mean, this seems like pretty self-explanatory. I know like Chastain's going to be a guy who I think he just kind of gets filtered out. Same thing with like Chase Elliott. I think Logano as well. I think Elliott will get a little bit of ownership because like obviously starting 18th is good enough, but also I think he's decent leverage off guys like, Chastain to a degree, but even guys like Larson and Blaney who are starting just a few spots behind him. And he is also a little bit cheaper than them, about 1K cheaper than Larson. This is, I want to say it's like pretty straightforward, those stats. Like I think Hamlin's your clear dom. You have the clear PDs here. Bell and Reddick are just kind of throw-ins for tournaments. Elliott's, that leverage off, Larson, Blaney. You can throw in Byron if you want, but I think he's closer to a lock. What are you doing with the stud range here?
Yeah, I mean, all the ownership is really on those first 4 guys because I just said, I mean, Denny has dominated here. He's got 2 firsts and a second last year in the last 3 trips in with the next gen car. So obviously a massive favorite, as you said, plus 300 on DraftKings. The clear favorite. Next choice is Blaney on DraftKings at plus 600, and Blaney's the second highest salaried driver here on the slate. These guys, the next 3 guys, Blaney, Larson, and Byron, are all just going to be more of place differential plays. I think clearly Byron starting 31st. I think he's the best driver at this particular track, probably of the other those other 2. And you're getting the 31st start position. He's got just more upside here at a cheaper price. So I think I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think Byron just might be a lock button play. He finished 4th here on at this track last year, a couple of 14ths before that, and then at Michigan, I think, did he wreck out in Michigan this year?
I'll check that. I'll just double check that real quick. I was thinking Michigan, didn't we have a little bit of chaos in it? I'm trying to think what that race was, because what was it? Not even, was that just 2 weeks ago?
It was pretty recent, yeah. And Hamlin, it was more than 2 weeks ago, but it was Hamlin won that one.
Yeah, I mean, second in stage 1, first in stage 2. So yeah, and then 98 laps led. So he had to wreck out.
That's what it was. Yeah. So he did dominate there. So it's going to be, for me, I think he's the safest lock button play on the slate. So I mean, if I'm doing that, obviously it's going to take away a bit of my ownership on some of these other high price guys. But I think you got to look at Byron's the top play. I think Denny is right behind that. I'm always less apt to lock button the guy who's on the pole, just because more right has to happen for him than Byron. Byron doesn't necessarily have to win this race. I think Denny obviously is going to have to get out there, dom some points here, and then get get a top 3 finish or something like that. More than likely to be in the winner, especially with these place differential guys, right? Because
that's what it was
now.
Yep. It was Byron ran out of gas at Michigan. That's exactly what it was. Now that makes so much sense there. I remember watching that. That was the fuel mileage race on Amazon Prime. Okay.
Yes. Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I didn't know if it was on Prime. I think I was out at the bar, and of course they couldn't get it on.
I think you were out of town 2 weeks ago.
Oh, that's when I was out. Yeah. Okay. I was in New York for that one.
We didn't do a show for that race.
Right. That's right. Yeah, I was in New York for that one and missed it, so I didn't even see that race. But yeah, I think and then you look at Byron. You look at Byron in practice. He was in the B group, which was the fastest group, but he was the best car in practice. I think everything just kind of points to Byron. You've got Larson here. Obviously, it's Kyle Larson. We want to look at kind of driver ratings at the intermediate tracks, and no one's been better than Larson. But if you look at Pocono Next Gen, he is on the lower end of these. He's actually the lowest driver rating of the guys in the 9,500 plus range. So not necessarily his favorite track in the next gen car. And Blaney is not much better than Larson has been here. So now he won here last year, Blaney, that is. And then the 2 previous races, looks like he wrecked out because he finished 30th or worse in those other two races. So I think the clear favorite here for me is going to be Byron and then Denny. And then if I had to choose between Blaney and Larson, I think I'd probably go with Larson and then Blaney. But yeah, it's going to be heavy Byron and Hamlin for me. The next guys, you've got Bell and Reddick. I don't particularly like either one of them. I don't think Bell has been particularly good in 2025 in intermediate package, and Pocono. He's actually been more of a mid range. You take his driver rating, it comps more towards the guys in like the 8K range than it does someone over 10K. So I don't like Bell here. I think he's a good fade. I think Reddick is a fade as well. Does not Pocono, as far as his driver rating, not all that great. Both of these guys starting in the top 10. I don't expect much from either one of these guys. Elliott, I think, is interesting. He's going to be, he will get probably once you get past those first four, I think he gets the next. So he's probably the fifth highest owned because he's starting 18th. Kind of decent history here. He's got 3 top 10s, a third place finish back in 2022. So, in Michigan, he finished 15th this year. I think he could be an interesting play. He has not I don't believe he's led any laps on 1.5 mile tracks. I could be mistaken. I don't think he's led at all this year, but no, I think I'm wrong. I'm thinking of someone else, but he does the one thing he's got going though, and it's not going to help you get in top 20. I think he's got like a 19-20 race streak going for top 20 finishes. So he's been pretty good at not wrecking out races, but we need more than that with him starting 18th. It's going to take a strong finish. So I think Elliott is fine as maybe a little bit of a differentiator, has the ability to get you a top 5, but I think he's like the 5th best option, maybe above here. I don't know if we got down to Logano, but doesn't Logano just seem to be always like he's right in that spot, qualifies right around 10th, 12th, not high owned, and every once in a while he just kind of sneaks in there, wins a race that you don't expect him to win. I don't see it coming here. He looked pretty slow in practice, but he will be low owned and certainly not going to take him out of my 150 just because, like I said, he can surprise you. And so I think having 10 to 15% of Logano, not the worst thing.
So this is my counter to that, right? And I'm with you on everything else, right? When I looked at Chastain and Logano, those were 2 guys. I think I ruled out Logano, but then I included Chastain, I included Bell, and then I just ran a set. And it's almost like, well, I have to take out people because those 5% matter to get more Byron, or those 5% matter to get more Bubba, more Barry. And I feel like I'm just going to be even with the field unless I get rid of these other guys. And Logano, I cut him, and it was 6 or 7%. And that 6 or 7% immediately went into the PD guys, right? Where it's just okay, I'd rather have I'd rather leave salary and play a guy like Barry or Bubba or even Kyle Busch than go up to that 9,200 range, right? If I'm going to get a little bit unique, I'll just leave salary rather than trying to get too cute and play like a guy like Logano. Because this kind of goes to the case point too, where it's just there's so many good plays, right? There's so many elite plays who have a very high chance of being optimal. How low do I want to go with them? If I'm comfortable being underweight on the field, yeah, Logano and those guys I'm okay with. But like you said earlier, it's how do you not just hit the lock button on Byron, right? Larson and Blaney, you can make the case they're too expensive, right? And they're starting, 7, 11 spots higher. You have Hamlin who can really put up a high score too. But past that, how can you fit in Byron, Hamlin, and Logano, right? Because then you're leaving out a pretty hefty mid-range where it's Busch could probably outscore him. Bowman could probably outscore him. Wallace could outscore him. I know you can probably get one of those with the studs or even 2. But obviously Barry would have to be in that lineup. And then, it just kind of thins out a little bit too quick for me. That's why I'm not interested as much with Logano, as much with Chastain. And I like your case you made about Bell, where it's just, it's probably just not worth clicking him because is he really going to lead laps, right? His odds are worse than all those guys ahead of him, Byron, Larson, and Blaney, or just above him in the price range. His odds are worse than Reddick. It's almost better to just kind of bite the bullet with the PD, maybe get there from by leaving salary, if anything. But again, Uncle T, it's hard to leave salary today. I mean, it is. I don't want to leave 1,400, I'm staring at it like, oh man, I can easily get, let's say if I had like someone cheap, like I had, AJ Allmendinger, but I could get, Alex Bowman or Bubba Wallace. I'll 100% do that. And that's where the thing is, where these studs are so elite. Like even Hamlin's elite. And I think I'd rather go up to them than miss out on them and leave any salary at all. There's just not going to be a ton of chaos here. I know Xfinity defied that yesterday with 11 cautions or something, but we will see a little bit cleaner race. I just don't see as much chaos happening. I think guys will make their way through the pack, and I don't want to just leave salary just to leave it unless I'm in an awkward range, which would be below 10-4 and above like what I think you can maybe draw the line at Bubba. Like if I'm leaving salary, I'd have to have one of Bubba, Bowman, or Barry, or two of them, and I'd have to have two of these studs here. Then I can get cute with salary after that. All right, let's go ahead and move into the mid tier. There's a lot of drivers here in the mid tier stats. We'll break it up into two. We'll go 7,500 and up. And you know what? I'm going to do this. So actually, we'll leave Bubba in the range because I think it will group better with the PD below. Let's do Carson Hocevar and up just for this sample here. Chris Buescher, plus 1,200 to win, starting second. You think Hamlin's the favorite for sure. Buescher, can he get the lead early? Can he dom? Can he be in the winner? Outside of him, there's only one PD play in this range. That is Kyle Busch. And I know your feelings in Kyle Busch. It's not very bullish on a week-to-week basis. I don't think it's going to be changing this week. But what are you doing with this range here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could start with Buescher, who is on the front row. He probably had the fastest car at Michigan from what I saw, and he's going to be fast again this week. He's just the problem is can he get the jump on Denny at the start of this race? Unlikely, but I think Buescher, you're going to get fairly low ownership, probably in that 20% range. He potentially could be the guy who is a little bit of a differentiator. If we don't get a Hamlin to dom, it very well could be Buescher. Just going back here, I want to look at where he's been in at Pocono. Yeah, I mean, decent as far as driver rating here. He's actually in this range, in that 8K to 9K range. He is the best. He's got the best driver rating on intermediate tracks this year. So I think Buescher is interesting and does have the potential. I don't expect it, obviously. I do think Hamlin kind of gets out in front, gets in the clean air, and runs away from the pack. But Buescher is going to be solid here. His short term in practice, 3-lap average, 5-lap average was right up there with Byron, who was the best this week. So I think Buescher is interesting. I think you're going to get him at a fairly low ownership because of that starting position. And if you're going to single entry and you say, you know what, screw it, I'm gonna try to fade Denny here. Then I think you probably want to take Buescher. If I wasn't going to play Denny in a lineup, then I think Buescher would be the pivot off of that. Obviously, a lot cheaper, and it'll change up how you're going to play this dramatically if you go down to Buescher and you take Denny out. So I think that's certainly one way to go about it. You mentioned Kyle Busch down here, and obviously he's the best PD until we get to Bubba. So if we take it from the 7,700 up, Kyle Busch is going to get ownership. I just don't love him. I mean, he was historically when he, previously when he was with JGR, really, really good here. Since he's with RCR, I mean, you look at the driver rating for intermediate tracks. I mean, really, it's Keselowski, we didn't even mention Gibbs and Busch, but those three guys, and they're right next to each other in price, are really their driver rating is down with the guys in the low 6K range. All three of these guys at intermediate tracks this year. So now Pocono, in the next gen, he's actually been very good, Kyle Busch. So you got to take that into account. He's starting 26, pretty good place differential. I can't totally fade him here because he has had some success here at Pocono. I think there's better options though than Kyle Busch. 20. I'm going to be under the market, which I think 20% will be under the market. I'll go under with Kyle Busch. I think he winds up somewhere closer to the 30% range on Kyle Busch there. So, when you look, I mean, Chase Briscoe starts 6th. I have no interest there. I think, Hocevar winds up being a factor in the race. Yeah. Second most Dom points at that Michigan race. And I think you have to respect Hocevar, but the problem is, the starting position of 3, I think at the price, 7,700, I think he falls into, he's like a Chris Buescher light for me. I think you can play Hocevar for sure. I would not X him out. I think if you have him about 10% or something like that in your 150 builds, I think in your 20 maxes, you want to sprinkle one in.
Does he get wrecked today? Does this just
we talked about it last week. Always a possibility with Hocevar, but I think, look, I mean, I like Hocevar. I like the aggression. Yeah. Again, another guy looked terrible. He was in the A group, so you kind of throw out his practice times. Looked awful, but has been in 2025 in intermediate with the intermediate package, and his driver rating is up there with the guys in the like the Chase Elliott's. He's actually higher than a Chase Elliott, higher than a Logano. So he's got a rating that's better than some of the guys in that 9K range. So I think he does have the potential to be a factor in this race. And I think he's going to have a strong finish.
I like it. I know that you have some short tracks coming up on the calendar here shortly, I believe. So let me go ahead and get that NASCAR schedule up. But I think I was reading some comments too, where it's like, obviously, Atlanta. Then you have the Chicago street course that you can get some revenge on him too. I think it was the street course that I was looking at. Where is Stenhouse going to get revenge? Because he said he was going to, quote, kick his ass once they got back to the United States. And, well, we're back in the United States this week. So I'm curious to see if Stenhouse can even get to the bumper of his car. But it could happen in a couple of weeks' time in Chicago. Either way, I don't expect this to be a fun next 4 weeks for Carson Hocevar one way or another. I'm going to set the over-under on Rex at 2.5. And I think the juice will definitely be on the under, but I think it'll be a fun time to watch the racing. He's obviously super talented. I mean, that's just the one thing you can't take away from him. He's going to be up there. He's shown the ability to just drive the hell out of that car. And him and Buescher, I think they're viable options. I think Hocevar being 1.1K cheaper also gives you like a path to unique builds. And if you did want to fade Hamlin, then you can go one of Buescher or Hocevar. Can you stack them, though? I think that's the question I'm going to ask you, Stats. Can you stack Hamlin with one of Buescher and Hocevar?
Yes, you can. So, because historically, like I said, we've seen a lot of almost in the last 3 races here in the next gen, we've had 2 top 10 starting cars in the winner. So absolutely, we could start 2 drivers in the top 10. It's all about finish position. There's not a ton of Dom points out there to be had, even if one Doms. And then at the price as well for Hocevar, I think it's fine at 7,700. He gets if he finishes in the top 3, I think that winds up getting him into the winner. So, and you're going to have, I mean, there's no doubt we're going to have a few of these place differential guys make it. So we're going to, and some of them are fairly expensive, some maybe not so much. I mean, we're going to talk about Bubba, who's cheaper than Hocevar, who's in a great situation. You got Barry in a really good situation at a cheap price. So, yeah, I could easily see Hocevar or Buescher join Denny in the winner.
I like it. One thing I do want to mention, I feel bad for Keselowski at this point. I feel like he is much better with the car than his results have been saying. I'm going to go back to him just a little bit. It's kind of in that fringe range where I do need someone to make a little bit of a difference. If he were to get a top 8, I think he could hit the winner, and he's going to be a guy who I kind of get the most of in this range, and Busch would probably be second. I don't have as much interest in Buescher and Hocevar, but it is one of those things where you can have multiple guys in the top 10. Like you said, they both have potential to, if they were to get in clean air, they can hold the lead. And that's really what matters here. Putting up a score of 50 plus is in the cards for any of those two guys, I should say. All right. This would be fun if Keselowski did hit the winner's circle. And Ian, you're right. PK is too expensive, but for the first time, it feels like in forever, he's not going to be chalk. And this is the time where he'll finally hit the winner because he won't be 30% owned this time. All right, so let's go ahead and move on down to the juicier part of the mid-range. And someone asked a question, how much Bubba is too much Bubba? And I got to ask that question to you, Stats. How much Bubba you getting this week?
You can I'm actually contemplating. I don't think I've done it ever with the on a cup race. I have in truck or Xfinity double lock button for 150 lineups, and I am contemplating it here with Bubba, because Byron's going to be a lock button, and then Bubba's my second option to lock button. So yeah, my answer is you could get as much as you want of Bubba. I think he had electrical issues in the qualifying, and so that's been all taken care of. That's why he's down, starting in the 34th position, and he's finished right around 10th in the 3 next gen races here. So outside of Byron, I think this is the most likely, and of course at a much cheaper price. I think he's the most likely to get into the winner at the 7,500. I think a top 10 just gets you there, and easily has that ability to do that here, has done it. He's got a 4th place recently at Michigan. Like I said, his last 3 races here, all right around 10th, which I think is going to get it done. And then back in 21, a 5th place. If you recall, it was a while ago. He had an awful wreck here. I'm trying to remember, and I needed him. I don't know if I had a bet on him, but I needed him in DFS, where the brakes didn't work, which was scary. And he was on the straightaway here and just couldn't. I think he took it into the infield to try to slow himself down, but that was a scary one. But that was a while ago, and since then, and in the next gen car, he's been really, really good, and been one of the better driver ratings on intermediate tracks here the entire year. So outside of like the 4 highest, the 4 guys, Hamlin, Blaney, Larson, and Byron, I think Bubba's had the next best, or actually it's Bowman and then Bubba are the next best driver ratings with the intermediate package. So I expect Bubba to find his way into the winner here today.
Yeah, you make an interesting point too on the double lock. I did that last week, and if people do that, right, like let's say you're running 10 lineups, right, or 20 lineups, and you're just watching the show. When you double lock someone, it's tough to pay attention to the other exposures. And this is what I ran into last week, is that outside of Bell and SVG, where I had 100% of, which I know that they were super chalk, I was not getting different in that sense, but it's really tough to get overweight on anyone else. And if you're running 150, well, it's really tough to get overweight on anyone else. You can do it with 20. Let's say you were like, okay, cool, I have Bubba, I have Byron, I'm going to try and get 50% Barry, right? That can be even with the field or even overweight. I'm going to try and get a lot of Barry too. And then I'm going to try and get different elsewhere. But what you're going to see if you ever double lock someone is the inability to really get overweight on everyone else. And I'm kind of with you though. Like, what are the odds that Bubba and Byron don't make the winner if the race is clean? Well, if the race is clean, it's like close to 95%, I'd feel, for both of them, right? Where I maybe Bubba, like more like 75%, because he can get like 21st or whatever. Not that he has done that at this track. This is a very good track for him, as noted. But yeah, I mean, it's just really tough for one of those two in a clean race to not hit the winner. And I think both being a lock could be the move. But then also, like, if you really want to play devil's advocate, right? Bowman, leverage play, starting 25th. Cindric, not the worst, starting 19th. Josh Berry starting 35th. You have some options in this range, right? Like, if you didn't want to go 100% Bubba, and you're like, okay, I really like Berry over a guy like Bubba Wallace, which, I mean, I think Bubba is definitely the class of the field in this range, I should say. And then Bowman starting 25th. Like, you have options, right, Stats?
You definitely have options. To kind of piggyback off your point, yes, it's difficult with the ownership on the other drivers, the allocate, if you're going to lock, certainly if you're going to lock 2. But I mean, you take it when you do that. Let's say you lock in a Byron, and let's say you just lock in Byron, right? And let's say he's 50%. Let's say Bubba's 50%. The amount of lineups should be about 50% multiplied by 50% should be about 25% of all entries should have both of those, right? Approximately. So if you go 100% Byron, anything over 25%, you're still ahead of the field on that combo, which is what we're looking for, which is why you're locking in. So if you wind up with 100% Byron and 35% let's say, of Bubba, that's still probably ahead of the field, assuming they were both 50%. So so while yes, your allocations are going to look a little bit different, you're going to have to drop. Certainly if you're 100% Byron, Hamlin's is going to cost you some ownership, and those guys up at the top. But it's really about the combination of the both of the 2 or 3 drivers that you're looking at, and how often they appear in entries is what you're more concerned about, right? So when you don't lock someone in, I'm kind of specifically looking at each individual ownership level and how much I own them in my 150. When I start locking any driver in, then that's going to change. So then I still may be over on the combo. So hopefully that makes sense. But yeah, down in this range, I mean, Berry is another guy who looks almost like a free play here at starting 35th. We've got a few guys who are just going to be just massively owned. I think Berry's probably the 3rd highest owned, if not 4th. 3rd or 4th, you've got Denny, Byron, and Bubba, and then I think Berry comes in there fairly high owned as well. I think they're all 40+% guys. And you look, he had Berry was 12th at Michigan. He had some decent success here. He's got a 5th place finish back in 22. You look at his intermediate, like the driver rating, not as strong as I would have liked it, not close to where like a Bubba is on the intermediate package, but very, very good and better than most in this range at Pocono in the next gen car with the driver rating. He is up there with Alex Bowman and Bubba, very similar. And then when you've got guys like Cindric and Priest who are just down with the some of the lowest guys, like the sub 5K range at Pocono in the next gen car driver rating. So kind of just to give you a little bit of perspective. So I do anticipate Berry being good. If I had to make my choice, I think I like Bubba over Berry. But man, it's going to be really difficult for Berry, Bubba, and Byron not to find their way to the winner. Which one of those guys? Now, the odds are one of them at least will not. If I had to pick one, I think it's going to be Berry. But man, it's going to be a lot of very chalky lineups, I think, out there. So to differentiate yourself, that's why I kind of like the lock button on those guys as well, because it does allow me to differentiate myself in my 150 builds, where the one thing I didn't mention, I mentioned it on the show. If you're going to lock button, if you're 20 maxing or whatever you're doing and you lock someone in, that's you need to be have a little bit more variety in your lineups, diversity in your lineups than maybe you normally would, because you're locking in one, certainly if it's 2, then the whole reason you're doing that is to bring in drivers. You don't want to necessarily X out as many drivers as you would. So if I don't lock anyone and I'm not playing anyone super heavy, that's when I want to start Xing out a lot of drivers. If I'm locking people in, then I want to bring more drivers into the fold, and then I'm hoping for one of these 5-6% owned guys that I may have in one of my lineups that's going to hit the winner. So that's kind of how I play it there. And so yeah, I think to go back, forget where my original point was, but I think of these guys, I think it's going to be pretty chalky. It's going to be hard to see Berry not making the winner, but of all those guys who are going to be the heavy chalk, I think Berry's probably the weakest one of all of them.
Yeah, I like it. Anyone else that you want to spend on in the mid-range here? I know you just kind of blanketed the whole section. I mean, did you mention Stenhouse at all? Is he a decent place starting 30th? I think he was the one guy that I didn't hear you mention.
Yeah, no, I didn't talk much about Stenhouse. I don't particularly I don't like Stenhouse all that much. Here we've got he's starting 21st, decent place differential play. Has not been good in this intermediate package. Very poor driver rating here. Not great in the Pocono at Pocono in the next gen. So not one of my favorite plays. I don't know. Did we get down to like a McDowell and Allmendinger? Or we're going to go?
Not yet. We're going to get. We can go ahead and get to them now here. Stats. I mean, this is one thing we're already running on 1142, but here's the value range, right? Like if you wanted to mention Jones, McDowell, and Allmendinger. To me, like Allmendinger will probably be the best and most popular. Click McDowell right there too. I think McDowell actually will be a little bit higher owned. The odds are in his favor, and it's not the worst odds when you're 6,200. And then below these guys, you just don't have a ton of options. Gilliland's going to be a fine click. But yeah, like Nemechek and Custer starting 4th and 5th. I mean, I'm fading both those guys just for what it's worth. And then Ty Dillon is a guy I'm always going to have interest in at this point. But this value range, like there's like maybe a handful of drivers that I could have interest in. And I think you're going to be the same way. But what do you think about the value?
Yeah, definitely. When you get down to the low end here, we start losing. There's not many options, right? But I think right before you get to that sub 6K level, McDowell and Dinger are the two obvious choices. I do like. I like both of these guys really for good place differential. You've got really good when you look at Dinger's driver rating here in 2020. I mean, it's really it's up there. He's higher than Hocevar, higher than Buscher. So I think Dinger is a really strong play, and I think we're going to get him at a relative, in the mid 20s. I don't know where Sabres got him as far as ownership, but I think Dinger is one of the stronger plays on the entire on the day here, and I think McDowell's not that far off him. But between the two, I'm going with Dinger here, and even though McDowell's had some success, he does have a top 10 here in the next gen car. I think the other interesting play in this range is Jones. He starts 11th, but really strong. The driver rating and history here at Pocono in the next gen cars, has a 9th place finish, has an 11th. His worst finish in next gen was 14th last year. Had a pretty decent showing with an 11 over in Michigan. So I think Jones certainly is not going to get a lot of ownership. I think he could be a sneaky, just kind of sneak him in there as a very low owned option, someone who I think has potential to maybe get a strong finish here. But once you get below Allmendinger, I think you got to be careful. I think you mentioned Gilliland down here. Gilliland has not, as far as speed, has not had speed. I think Gilliland's success has come from more strategy that they've implemented and gotten a little bit lucky. I'd be careful. I think Gilliland winds up being the highest owned. I don't think there's any doubt sub 6K driver. I'd be worried about just clicking. If you need that salary saver and you're looking for these guys sub 6K that's going to fit in. I don't necessarily like Gilliland. I would avoid. I think for where he's going to be owned is not as good a choice as you may think. Down here you've got, Nemechek and Custer. Custer was our guy last week. Wound up hitting the nuts. I really like Custer, but those guys, it's insane where those guys are qualified. They're not going to take. I think the guy down here that you could actually play is, and I don't think you're necessarily going to need it, but if you need a ton of savings, I don't mind Cody Ware at the 4,700. That was probably my favorite option of the cheap guys. But I just don't think you need. There's going to be very few instances. Now, if you want to throw a Cody Ware in there and you're going to take 3 super expensive drivers, maybe in that scenario you do. Unlikely you'll need him, but he would be my favorite of the sub 6K guys.
That is, one of those things where I've seen you do this before. You'll play a 4,700 guy purely because if it's like the last build to fit or the last player to fit, right? Where, no one else is going to be able to have those set of 5 drivers without playing a guy like Cody Ware, right? So, I see where you're coming from there. But you make great points here about the value range. Jones being a guy who definitely won't be owned here, I don't think at all. But McDowell, Dinger, those 2 guys, good PD. I'm with you on Allmendinger. He's actually one of my favorite plays in this range as well. Shane Van Gisbergen, great win last week. That's why he's in the Cup Series. He's not going to be one today. It'll be something. And what you had to say about Gilliland, it's interesting too, because I like the different strategies, right? Because to me, it shows the car maybe not have the horsepower to get up into the top 20 or whatever, but as long as the crew chief is willing to think a little bit different, go against the grain, it can be good enough. But I think you're right though. 5,600, starting 32nd might be a little higher owned than he needs to be. Haley, Dillon. I don't think I'm going to go any of these top 5 guys with Nemechek and Custer, but it is one of those things where, I don't really know what to do with those guys in the top 5. Probably just fading overall. And probably just kind of going with a guy like Ty Dillon, who, again, it just somehow was always in the mix. And even last week, he was rubbing shoulders for 12th and 13th on the road course and stuff. I think he's just going to be a guy where I just kind of keep clicking at 5K. And, once he has a string of bad finishes, then I'll finally jump off. All right, stats driver of the day. What are we doing?
See, I'm looking at Sabre now to get these ownerships, and I think it's low. I hate taking it when I think it's going to be higher. We're usually pretty right on with the ownerships, but they've got Dinger at like 17. I think that's too low.
You can take it. You can take Dinger.
I'm taking it. I think it's I think he's the obvious sub 20 if that was accurate. Looking at Sabre, but I think he's going to be probably closer to 25%. But down, I think he's a really strong option. And if not Dinger, then McDowell, the two guys that we just talked about.
Yeah, and I we were debating Chase Briscoe. He actually came in under, I think it was like 15% or whatever last week. So we did get away with that one. Your Custer call last week was incredible. That's also what made me mad, Stats, is that I was actually overweight on Custer because of what you said. And I still didn't have the nuts with the Bell and SVG line. You know how frustrating that was? I'm frustrating. Because I'm sitting there, I'm like, the whole time the race is going, and I didn't really check the leaderboard too much. But then all of a sudden, I'm like checking it halfway through. I'm like, I should be crushing. How am I not crushing? How am I not crushing, man? I see Custer at the top. This is going to be a slate that's tougher to get different, I want to say. Right? You're going to have your obvious PD plays, as we mentioned on this show. I'm going to go, again, sub 20%. Yeah, I might be admitting that I'm a little bit of a chalk donkey here. If you know me, that's obviously true. But I probably might not go him in my main team. But I'm going to go with Brad Keselowski. I think he'll get a top 10 today. I think he'll be a guy who I'm overweight on in my enemy set. And overall, I just think that he is due. And, you can't argue with someone who's hashtag due, right? That's just like, why are you playing him? Well, he's due, right? And you know what? If he doesn't hit this week, he's due next week too. So that's
every bar I've ever listening to someone make a bet at any bar, and I would say 75% of the time it's like he's due.
He's due.
It's as good a reason as any.
There's no better reason in sports. I know that growing up, Adam Dunn, obviously a big bopper for the Reds, and then obviously finished his career with the White Sox and stuff. But the amount of times my dad would say Adam Dunn's due, and he just hit a home run 3 at-bats ago, always got me.
well, with that guy, I mean, if he went 2-3 at-bats without a home run, then he was due.
Yeah, he was due. So, he was 100%.
And he was always due for a strikeout. So.
Hey, you know what? The greatest thing, and I know I'm getting off topic here. I know that we're finishing up the show, but if you look at Adam Dunn's stats, he is a modern-day baseball dream. His OBP was always real high, 350 range. His home runs, 40 home runs, 100 RBIs. His OBP was impressive. He drew a ton of walks.
What was his lifetime batting average?
I want to say it was 240, but the walks made up for it. I think it could even be lower than that, actually.
I'm looking at it right now. 240. All right. Before I look at it, I'm gonna bet under the 240.
Yeah.
And oh my God, you're good, man. 237, and I just nipped you. 237 lifetime batting average.
So obviously, growing up in the Cincinnati area, Adam Dunn was one of my favorite players growing up. Griffey #1, of course, but that outfield was fun. Austin Kearns was supposed to be something that never panned out, but that outfield was fun. Adam Dunn, what was his OBP?
Let's see. OBP was career 364 OBP. Yeah, it's
that's an all-star every single time now, especially with the DH too. With the DH now, you'd be the best DH in the
Absolutely.
Oh God! All right, enough nerding out about baseball. We got to get out of here. We got to talk about baseball here in 10 minutes. There'll be a show in 10 minutes, as well as the Game 7 NBA Finals at 3 p.m. There will be a show with Big T and JSU. Thank you all for joining us again. Code RPS15, 15% off your first purchase. But we also still have that one JBC Win 100K. Gets you a free week if you sign up for a month if you use that code and weren't a member prior to that. So be sure to click on or use that code. Everyone have a great rest of y'all's day. We are out of here.